good that all of you are here. And good to see this number because since morning, whichever class I am going to, the number is almost 40%. So I was kind of expecting it to your class also. But nice to see that you are at least 70 odd percent people who have turned up. ये मैं जानता हूँ दिवाली के बाद हैंगओवर काफ़ी देर तक रहता है. Still, yeah. I fully appreciate that happens. Let's see. So what we will do is we will first finish up on few small portions that we were left in on Indian economy and then get into microeconomics after that. Regarding the questions I gave you, there was one question last week the answer to which I'll give you today. And the other two questions, of course, by this weekend, I'll give you the answers to those. Also, I will expect that the answer to, if you have written, because I had already given you the answer, if you recall, more or less the answer at least to the question on evergreen revolution is with you. In case you write something and want to show it to me, you can always bring along. I will be okay with it. I don't give you a scathing criticism, so don't worry about writing a bad answer. All right? तुम अगर बहुत खराब भी लिखते हो तो मैं ये नहीं कहता हूँ तुमने बहुत खराब लिखा है या घटिया लिखा है. मैं तुम्हें बस समझा देता हूँ कि उसको ठीक कैसे कर सकते थे. Because I know that you are just starting it. So I fully appreciate that when you start writing answers, it takes time to acclimatize and do things. So if you feel you have written something or you want to write something and show it to me, I always am okay with that. I'm happy. You can do that. All right. Another is that I have developed, as I told you in the first class, I have developed the answers to past year questions. So some of the past year questions, therefore, I did not discuss with you. But some questions I will discuss with you as the course progresses. As in, immediately I'm not doing it because I know that there are too many things on hand. But gradually I will pick up 4 or 5 questions from past year, even from India between 47 and 91, discuss it with you. And that way you will be able to understand how to write answers. But that will happen gradually. Right now, if you ask me, my major concern is that we should be on track of finishing the syllabus. Since we started around 10th October, so what keeps sticking in my mind is that we should not go beyond 3rd week February positively. So I'm trying to do that. But again, I cannot compromise on your understanding. And I cannot compromise on your development of the subject. So let's see this. In micro, again I repeat, in case somebody has not read micro NCERT, I hope there is none left. But in case somebody has, by somebody I mean those who don't have a background in economics. If you have a background in economics, then you don't need to read NCERT anyways. But those who don't have, please do read, because I will assume that you know concepts like elasticity. All right? I cannot go back and teach you concepts on demand elasticity and so on in the class. I'll assume you know that. In case you don't, you can ask Sandeep sir. Today he is also on leave. He called me up in the morning, said that I'm not feeling well. I said, why lie? Tell me you don't want to come. I fully appreciate that. So he started laughing. So you know, that is the idea that you know, he's not there today, but he will be there from tomorrow and we can go through. Now see, when we talk about 2 things that I had to discuss with you one by one. So one was about development of economic structure in India, both occupational as well as income structure, between 51, 71, 91, and we will analyze why it developed the way it did. But if you ask me, the most important aspect is what happened post 91, but that I will discuss with you when I'm teaching you India after 91. But 51 to 91, we will try developing one understanding. And second question that I wanted to discuss with you, or second discussion, was role of public sector and role of private sector in India between 51 and 91 or before 91 in the pre-liberalization period. So on all of these, we will try writing 500 words each so that we are prepared for in case they ask us something on these portions. And then we will begin with micro. When I'll begin with micro, I will begin with consumer behavior with you. All right, that is what will be the first topic we will begin with, and that also with the cardinal utility theory. All right, so consumer behavior and cardinal utility theory, we'll pick it up in micro. In micro onwards, my suggestion will be that you must make sure that you are revising the classes well and you are understanding the applications well. Initially, it will be still okay, but gradually, as I introduce more complex things, you will have to understand them good enough. That is the only thing. Understanding is the key. The question part and all everything I'll take care of. You don't worry about what questions they can ask you. But I will worry about and what you should worry about is that whether your understanding is correct or not. Same thing applies on Indian economy. Your understanding has to be correct. You know, that why did it happen, what happened exactly, how were things adding up. So when you read public sector, private sector, say when I teach you today, connected to India's growth story in 60s, 70s, 80s, and connected to saving investment growth in those days. So all that horizontal connect, if you develop, that will put you in a very good position for answering questions on public sector and private sector. For example, before I go ahead, एक तुमने अतुल मुझसे उस दिन क्वेश्चन पूछा था, वो क्या था बताओ? I'll just tell you how you can think over these answers. Okay, so suppose if they ask you a question, before I start teaching you this, just quickly understand this question, that how do you justify, right? Justify, how would you justify the policy of land reforms? Land reforms in the light of farm size productivity debate. I want you guys to think over this question today. I will give you an answer to this question also in this week itself. But I want you to think over first that you know, how do you justify or how would you justify the policy of land reforms in the light of farm size productivity debate? 150 words. In the light of farm size productivity debate. 150 words. Aditya, you can make a PDF and send it to me on Telegram. Do it like that. So how do you justify the policy of, or how would you justify the policy of land reforms in the light of farm size productivity debate? I'll give you an answer, but I'm giving you the hint how you should think on it. See, first of all, in land reform, pick up mainly on land ceiling and land redistribution. Abolishing zamindari, land redistribution, land ceiling. Pick up mainly on that. And then talk about the farm size productivity debate. So first talk about farm size productivity debate, that is Hanumantarao, counter view to Hanumantarao, and counter view to the counter view of Hanumantarao. If you will see, that is all that I've given you in the sheet. You know, that what did C.H. Hanumantarao had to say. Then there were 2 points giving counter view to Hanumantarao's views, and then further there is a talk on the counter view to those counter views. Now that should make around 75, 80 words, 90 words of your answer if you write it entirely. Alright, Hanumantarao-ji's view, his counter view, and then the counter view to that counter view. So around 80 words, write on that. Then talk about the idea of land reforms into it, that is land ceiling being justified by Hanumantarao on that behalf, and apart from that, the basic idea on land redistribution, that is taking land away from the big landlord, distributing it among small landholders. So that you bring up, take around 20-25 words to say that this was the purpose of land productivity debate. And then give your view in 30-40 words, talking about how this could be true in the context of 5-acre to 10-acre land, but this, and then plus 10-acre plus land, but this may not necessarily be true in a smaller land holding. Also bring about the relevance of land redistribution in rural India as class redistribution. So if asset redistribution takes place well, it will allow land to give you higher returns. And then in the last 10-15 words, 20 words, talk about how the conclusion can be brought in. So talk about how modern India does not necessarily have to go into this debate because the farm size has gone down over time by a drastic amount. So now India will need new kind of redistribution policy, like the one we discussed with the points on modern land reforms. All right, so you can bring up 20-30 words from there. Remember, the questions have to be understood on what they are asking us, programmed as an answer. Finally, they are asking you 150 words. So you have to understand what are my most relevant 150 words. They are not, see, गलती कहाँ होती है? जहाँ हम key words पकड़ते हैं. Land reform, farm size productivity debate. फिर हम सोचते हैं अब क्या लिखूं, यही गलती करते हो। पूरे क्वेश्चन को पढ़ना है। ऑलराइट, यू हैव टू रीड द एंटायर क्वेश्चन, यू डोंट हैव टू पिक अप वर्ड्स। द मिस्टेक वी डू इज, अच्छा एक बोला लैंड रिफॉर्म, एक बोला फार्म साइज प्रोडक्टिविटी, तो एक तो हुआ हनुमंत राव, एक हुआ लैंड रिफॉर्म, अब जोड़ूं कैसे? नो, अंडरस्टैंड द क्वेश्चन दैट हाउ वुड यू जस्टिफाई द पॉलिसी ऑफ लैंड रिफॉर्म्स, दैट इज कैसे जस्टिफाई करोगे लैंड रिफॉर्म के पॉलिसी को इन द लाइट ऑफ द डिबेट ऑन फार्म साइज प्रोडक्टिविटी। तो एक तो कह रहे हैं कि फार्म साइज प्रोडक्टिविटी डिबेट बताओ और tell us the farm size productivity debate, and then in turn also tell us that how that farm size productivity debate adds up to doing land reforms in India. That story should be almost half of your answer, a little more than that. 80-85 words of your answer should be that. Once you have given that part of the answer, then come to talking your point of views. Okay, what was land reform about, as in land ceiling and land redistribution and so on. Then so 20-25 words on that, and then the 40 words should be about way forward. What can be done now? Why was this proposed? That is the way to 150 words conclusion. All right, so go like that, but you think over it. I've given you some hints, I'm sure. You think over it, and what we will do is, I'll give you an answer to this. If by chance the classroom time doesn't permit it, I'll put a model answer on our Telegram group as to how you could have approached this question. So this will start giving you some inkling of how you can approach such questions and how we can answer these. But mind you, always try answering using your knowledge base and your creativity with respect to how you frame answers based on what the question is asking. Also try writing them properly, thinking over. You will see that sometimes 150 words start becoming lesser than what you thought. You know, कभी कभी लगता है 150 वर्ड में ही कैसे लिखेंगे, क्या क्या लिखें इसमें। जब लिखना शुरू करोगे तो लगेगा कुछ कम पड़ गए, अगर और होता तो मैं और बात लिख सकता था। So that's writing practice, nothing else. The more you practice, that is why I keep giving you 2 questions continuously. The more you practice writing, the better off you become. Also remember, some questions will become better answerable after I have taught you India after 91. So when you will see questions on India between 47 and 91 from various sources like past year papers and all, it's possible some questions may look less answerable right now because some portions we have not yet covered. I'm so sorry. For example, questions on MSME, questions on poverty inequality, questions on overall India's disposition. So when I discuss MSME and all with you, then overall India's growth story will become even clearer to you. Export import from India, taxation policy in India, and so on. So you know, the more policy mechanism you read, better off you will become. All right, and just one last request. Get out of the festive mood as soon as possible. All right, just get out of it. ये तुम्हारे लिए जो ऑनलाइन सुन रहे हो उनको भी कह रहा हूँ, सोते सोते ही सुन रहे होगे हो सकता है कुछ लोग मुझे तो उनको भी कह रहा हूँ, get out of the festive mood as soon as possible. The sooner you get out of it, better off you are. Believe me on that. That the sooner you get out of it, better off you are. Inertia में मत रहो. वो inertia में स्पेशली रखेगा तुम्हें, अगर तुम 24 का अटेम्प्ट दे रहे हो तब तो तुम्हें लगेगा ये दुनिया जीतेंगे, अभी तो बहुत टाइम बचा हुआ है। तब क्या करो, किसी ऐसे से मिल लो जो 23 का अटेम्प्ट दे रहे हो और उनसे पूछो पिछले साल भी पढ़ रहे थे, तो वो बताएंगे पढ़ रहे थे, फिर बताएंगे इस साल भी टेंशन में हूँ, तो तुम्हें भी मोटिवेशन मिलेगा पढ़ने का। नहीं तो हम कभी कभी 24 पे सोच के सोचते हैं मेरे पास तो बहुत टाइम है। नहीं है तुम्हारे पास भी टाइम, किसी के पास भी इस एग्जाम में टाइम नहीं होता। जब से तैयारी शुरू की है लग जाना चाहिए। और सेकेंड प्रॉब्लम हो सकती है उनके साथ जो फेस्टिव इनर्शिया में रहते हैं। देयर इज अ फेस्टिव इनर्शिया। तुम देखना, अगर तुमने खूब मस्ती की, घूमे फिरे या दोस्तों के साथ या पेरेंट्स के साथ कहीं भी, इफ यू हैड अ लॉट ऑफ फन, देन वी आर इन इनर्शिया। सो थिंग्स गो बाय एंड वी आर स्टिल इन द इनर्शिया, सो वी स्टिल काइंड ऑफ कीप रिकॉलिंग वी हैड सच अ नाइस टाइम। दूर से किताब को देखते हैं, फिर प्लानिंग करते हैं, अच्छा कल से फिर शुरू करता हूँ। कल से नहीं, ब्रेक द इनर्शिया, एंड इनर्शियाज आर ब्रोकन बाय इमीडिएट एक्शन। अभी से, आज से, अभी करता हूँ। हो गया विभास की क्लास कर ली, अब तो फिर शुरू हो गई सारी चीजें, आज शाम से बैठ गया अब। सो डोंट वेट फॉर टुडेज इवनिंग टू पास ऑन and so on. So please be very careful on that. Next 2-3 months you may feel that inertia. Be careful. All right, 2-3 months अगले थोड़ा सा आप पावर कम फील कर सकते हो क्योंकि फुल ऑफ फेस्टिविटीज होता है, बस उसी में बच के रहना है। यू नो, अभी 10 दिन निकल गए, फिर 25 दिसंबर के आसपास 10 दिन निकल जाएंगे। बाई चांस बीच में आपका बर्थडे आ गया तब तो माशाल्लाह। तो इन सब से ही बचना है आपको, नथिंग एल्स। ओके, Let's then get going. So think over this question and I will talk to you about things. Now you give a heading, you write economic structures evolution, economic structures evolution between 1951 to 1991. 1951 to 1991. I'm giving you a table. It will help you in formulating the answer or understanding better. So this is economic structure of India between 1951 to 1991. Economic structure of India between 1951 to 1991. So percentage share of GDP, we pick that up here, and in the bracket I am writing percentage share of workforce. I hope you will recall, I think we had discussed this, that labor force is voluntary plus, involuntarily unemployed people plus working people, and workforce are all working people. All right, everybody who is working in the economy will be workforce, and all those who are working plus all those who are looking for work is labor force. All right, that is how you have to keep that in mind. Now let's build that up then. So if we take say sectors, agriculture, industry, and services, and 1991. So I'm sure you recall we had discussed it that in 1951 agriculture was contributing 53.1% and the workforce share was around 73%, isn't it? And industry was contributing approximately 17% and the workforce share was 10%, and services sector was contributing 29% and workforce share was 16%. So we had relatively lesser people in industry and services, much more in agriculture. The share of services was 29, but the dominance was of agriculture. By 1971, what we saw was that the share of industry had risen to 24%, the share of services sector had risen to 34%, and agricultural share was still at 42%. So we had industrialized heavily and gone ahead, but agricultural share was still a dominant theme. All right, we had industrialized heavily, gone ahead, but agricultural share was still the highest. It was not as high as it was in 51, but it was high. Also remember, industry was growing faster in its share capacity compared to even services. Like industrial share had increased by 7%, services sector share had increased by 5%. So industrial share was rising faster mainly because of Indian government's active policies to promote industrialization, especially heavy industries and capital goods industries. In share of workforce, we did not see a major change. This remained 68%. Industrial workforce increase was 12% and service sector was 20%. I will make you write all this, but just to give you an understanding, well, industrial share of workforce did not increase because most of industrial improvement was in the capital intensive sector. We did not see a very high presence of medium scale enterprises. So it was capital intensive sector that dominated the market a lot. So in that case, even though industry's share in GDP was rising, industry's share in labor force was not rising as much. And services sector share in labor force was rising mainly on account of government employment rising in India. So public administration, defense, law and order, these services were employing a lot of people. Then communication services were employing a lot of people, postal telegraph and all, railways, transportation services that is. Electricity department was employing a lot of people. So there were services sector growth mainly backed by government giving that service sector growth. And then by 1991, agriculture had come down to 29%, industrial share had increased to 28%, and services sector share was 43%. So we saw that between 71 and 91, the share of industry did not increase as much as services. Again, there were reasons for that. The biggest reason was the slowdown in industries in 70s, where we had a retrogression, and services sector like banking, post-nationalization improved a lot because of branch expansion, etc. Insurance expansion happened a lot in India. Public administration, if you recall in 80s to 90s, these services were rising very fast. And then new services, because before that India had very less presence of these, but new services like NGOs, the non-government organization, non-profit organization, they started growing very quickly. And in 80s, the software sector was rising comparatively fast. So we saw that, okay, services sector was also rising pretty fast in this time period, 71 to 91. And then trade was picking up in India, not external trade, but internal trade like wholesaling and retailing. So service sector was growing with all these reasons. It was not that industries were not rising, I'm sure you are understanding that. It was just that services were growing faster than the industries in this time period. And in employment, we again saw a very poor picture where still 65% people were in agriculture, which was showing the lack of industrialization through labor-intensive technique. That workers were not coming out of agriculture and getting absorbed in industries. That was not happening. Now, industrial share did show some improvement, and it improved to around 14%, but still 21% were in services. So that is where we were. Just for the sake of completion, just for the sake of it, we will not discuss it, but if I go to 2021, then agricultural share has come down to 17%, industrial share is almost 30%, and services sector share is 53%. And that is a very debated thing in India as to how India transformed from an economy dominated by agriculture to an economy dominated by services. And we never had a time period when India had an industrial dominance. Unlike other economies of the world, if you recall, in the first class also we were discussing it, that the normal historical path of growth is agriculture followed by industry and then services. But India never had that. But that discussion is for India after 91, and we will do that because then you will understand me factually much better. In the same thing, also remember, still we have 44% of the workforce in agriculture. Now that is something quite inefficient, because if agriculture is contributing only 17% of GDP, and if 44% people are in agriculture, that doesn't sound good. It can be a cause of inequality over a period. And similarly, 30% was the industry, 30% is the share of industry, but industry employs around 29% people, and services sector employs 27% people. In some places they will write 30% here and 26% here. That is because some places count manufacturing dealership as industry. Like जो ऑटोमोबाइल कार को बेचने वाली डीलरशिप है, कुछ लोग उन्हें इंडस्ट्री मानते हैं क्योंकि वो मैन्युफैक्चरिंग का ही काम कर रहे हैं, तो वो कहते हैं 30%, और उस केस में ये हो जाता है 26%. And some people say manufacturing is a separate activity and the dealership network, trading network is trading actually, so it should be counted as services. Alright, so that is why you will see some minor differences here or there. Don't get bothered, but this is the broad idea that we see in 2021, which says that even though in the last 30 years we have been able to bring out many people out of agriculture, but still a large number remains. And this is quite a bad idea in Indian context. Until we don't take out people from agriculture and put them into industries, put them into services, the chance that we can have of making sure that we have a modern economy will remain always compromised. All right. So the target has to be that. In case it comes to your mind, why shift people out of agriculture? Because agriculture can never be as efficient as what industry or services will be. Mainly because primary activities can give you returns only up to a limit. It's a decreasing returns idea. So in that case, you need secondary activities, and over a period, tertiary activities for incomes to keep rising. All right, that is the aspect of it. So economies have to plan themselves that, okay, we can plan some manufacturing and so on. Just giving you one snippet, I will not go into details of it, but when Dr. Rajan says that India should plan export-led growth on services sector, and India should not be doing manufacturing much like China, well, there are three issues in that. One is that India has this issue which Dr. Rajan is not realizing maybe or not mentioning or whatever, I have no idea. But he doesn't realize that you cannot shift these many people from agriculture into services even in the next 10 years. Even half of this number. If I am a landless agricultural labor, or if I am a small farmer, or if I am a marginal farmer, I don't become a service sector worker overnight. I don't even become a service sector entrepreneur overnight. I will need some transition for myself. Manufacturing gives that transition. That is one missing link in the argument. Second missing link in the argument is that Professor says that we should be growing export-oriented services. So the problem is that what if tomorrow those exports don't materialize? Because we see that the world is not doing very well when it comes to friendships, and India is placed quite interestingly. If I can, for the lack of a better term, I'm using the word interestingly, because right now even we don't know properly whose friends are we. And this is just an honest assessment. We don't know tomorrow whether Americans will stand by us or the Russians will stand by us. Which side do we go? So we also promote de-dollarization. On the other hand, we are also participants in Quad. So we are also participants in SCO. So it's happening all around us. We are everywhere. So we don't know. Now in the process, if we say service exports, now we are not exporting our services to Russians or Chinese. We will be exporting our services to Europe and Americans. So tomorrow, if we are not on their favorite side, we will lose big time after having invested a lot of time and money over here. So again, go back to what I was telling you a few classes back, that it's rather better that we promote our manufacturing so that we can promote our services also backed by that manufacturing. If India develops its own manufacturing better, then that manufacturing will demand services like banking, insurance, and so on, which will mean that our services can export, no doubt, but our services will also have a homegrown market. And that then can give them some impetus where even if the export market dries out, they will not be left without a business. The third problem I see in his argument at times is, he says it is for global warming that he is worried and climate change. That was the context of his speech also. And he said that manufacturing is quite anti-climate situation. Now point is, if India stops manufacturing, if we all stop manufacturing, I can appreciate. That if India doesn't manufacture and China doesn't manufacture, no country manufactures. Now that won't happen. Somebody will manufacture. Now that means global footprint cannot be reduced by asking India not to manufacture. Rather, India has one of the lesser per capita carbon footprint. India has possibility of much cleaner growth things. India also is already committing itself to cleaner sources of energy. Like we are saying that we will use hydrogen and we will be using green hydrogen, that is, and we will be doing away with coal over a period, and we will be using renewable energy, and we have been doing some record investments in renewable energy, and so on. So in that case, I think India can be better suited to do manufacturing. Plus, India has a large section of population which is not yet into manufacturing. So India does better there because we can manufacturing cheaper without actually costing the environment much. So under all that light, please keep the current debate. That if, and I'll give you this better as we go ahead. 2-3 महीने बाद तक ये बातें और clear हो जाएंगी. तो मैं जब आपसे बात करूँगा, India after 91 will be in a clearer shape. But I need you to understand and keep it in mind that, and fully keep it in mind that if we suggest that India should have a service-led growth and India should focus on service-led exports and then grow, we are assuming that it's only urban India which exists in this country. Rural India exists, and rural India has heavy dependence on agriculture as reflected even by these numbers. If I make it rural-urban, then imagine, you will become it even more starkly clear. So 44% people are in agriculture, and almost 92% of these are in rural areas. Now imagine it's like this. That means 38%, like 70% of India's total population is in rural areas. And almost 95% of agricultural workforce is in rural areas. Now that means if I take 65-66% population in rural areas, effectively in rural areas, almost 80% people are in agriculture or 75% people are in agriculture. Now that doesn't mean everybody is doing farming. Agriculture also includes dairying and forestry and fishing, but they are in it. But I'll give you some other interesting data there. ये सब बस आपके फीडिंग के लिए दे रहा हूँ, खाते जाओ इन डेटा को मेंटली, तो एनालिसिस ईजियर लगेगी जब आगे करूँगा. अब एक इंटरेस्टिंग डेटा अब देता हूँ तुम्हें. So 75% of the people in rural areas in agriculture, approximately, I mean, total अगर हम ऐसे कनेक्ट करके देखें, अब सोच के देखो, 70% of rural income is generated from non-agricultural activity. तो रूरल एरियाज में भी जो एग्रीकल्चर में है वो पैसे नहीं कमा रहे. You got to understand that if 75% of rural population is in agriculture and it is a rural system, you can expect that, okay, at least half of the income in rural area should be in agriculture. But what's happening is only 30% of income in rural area is coming from agriculture. The rest 70% is coming from non-agricultural source, like for example, transportation. और जो भी लोग गांव जाते हो, those of you who go to your village or near small towns, you will see very often that a very diversified business pattern prevails of the big landlords. जो वहाँ बड़े किसान रह गए हैं, उनका डाइवर्सिफाइड बिजनेस है. वो सिर्फ खेती नहीं कर रहे हैं, वो मनी लेंडिंग भी कर रहे हैं, वो रियल एस्टेट में बिजनेसेस भी डेवलप कर रहे हैं, उनकी बसें भी चल रही हैं. उन्होंने लोगों को ऑटो खरीद के दे दिया और बोला है तुम चलाओ गांव से शहर, तो वो लोग गांव से शहर ऑटो चला रहे हैं, फाइनली आके किराया उनको देते हैं. नाउ ऑल दीज आर नॉन एग्रीकल्चरल इनकम. उनके फूड प्रोसेसिंग का सिस्टम भी चल रहा है, ट्रेडिंग एस्टैब्लिशमेंट बनी हुई है. सो अंडरस्टैंड that even though we have large number of people in agriculture in rural areas, but the rural income is not dominantly coming from agriculture. Once we start appreciating that, all those people who say, oh, protect agriculture, it will protect poor in rural area, will realize it's not protecting them. Today's agriculture in India is less productive. Since it is less productive, it is less income generating. So understand it like that. एक और नया सिस्टम शुरू हो रहा है रूरल एरियाज में, क्योंकि प्रधानमंत्री ग्राम सड़क योजना चल रही है, प्रधानमंत्री आवास योजना चल रहा है, प्रधानमंत्री स्वच्छ भारत योजना चल रही है. तो अब रूरल एरियाज में एक नया सिस्टम देखा है मैंने, ये मेरा रिसर्च कहता है, आई एम नॉट सेइंग इट बाय एनी hearsay. My research says what has started happening now is the influential in the rural areas are very quickly picking up to another job, that is contractor business. And this has happened in the last 10-15 years in India quite a lot. Post Manrega, it has picked up like anything. तो कॉन्ट्रैक्ट बिजनेस में आ गए, दो जबरदस्त काम कर रहे हैं रूरल एरियाज में. अब मैं उन डिटेल्स में नहीं जाऊंगा क्योंकि वो तुम्हारे काम का नहीं है, क्योंकि उसमें कास्ट और रिलीजन एनालिसिस भी है, बट वहां हम नहीं जाएंगे. बट दो डिटेल काम चल रहे हैं रूरल एरियाज में, बहुत धड़ल्ले से देखा जा रहा है. इट्स वेरी फ्रीक्वेंटली सीन रूरल एरियाज. पीपल हु आर रिच ऑलरेडी आर चूजिंग sources where government compensates you for making things like roads or buildings and so on, or they are choosing politics, sarpanch election and so on, or both. Like one becomes the source of another. All right. So this is happening across India. It's not only happening in say one part of India. This is happening across India because government gives you the, or being in government gives you the benefit that okay, that way you can influence the decision making. So okay, be a sarpanch, and somebody who is nearer to you can then get the contract for making the rural road, and somebody who is nearer to that person can then get a contract of bricklaying and so on. And all this money will be finally paid by the government. So all that is itself playing a big role. And this is across rural India because the governance and administration and media exposure is all pretty low in these areas. So if you try doing something unnerving in Delhi or Mumbai or even a state capital, the chances you will get caught is faster or more. But if you do something 100 kilometers, 200 kilometers, 300 kilometers away from the state capital, then keep doing it. Things are still in your favor. You can go ahead and do it, and notices can be taken, but you can try subduing it and you can try controlling things and so on and so forth. So be very careful. That is also what we are going through, reflected again in rising role of services across India. But I just gave you a hindsight of 2021. I will be discussing the changes in 91 to 2021 separately. I'm giving you some write-up on this part, making sure that in case they ask you a question on income structure and occupational structure, you should have an answer to that. So you write, yes, yes. 100% growth, you see that? As in? You mean this, right? Okay, and you say that this is only this much. But that's because of a lot of people setting up small scale industries in India with the MSME 2006 policy. Why? But that's because services increasing faster. I mean, no, services are increasing faster than industry. It's not that industry is not increasing. I mean, India's GDP here was $220 billion. So that means our industry here was around $61 billion. Our industry here, India's GDP is $3 trillion. So our industry here is $900 billion. So it's not that industry is not rising. You see that? Industry has risen 15 times in India. In nominal terms, of course, but 15 times in India. And share in workforce is rising with rise in small scale industries, rise in more labor intensity with respect to certain manufacturing industries like textile, etc. So the share of in workforce is rising. Plus, in fact, it establishes our points even better that when people get out of agriculture, they can't jump to services. So actually, when you had a larger transfer from agriculture, the absorbing part was industry and not services. So if you want people to get out of agriculture, we will have to work on our manufacturing growth. You understand that? But the real problem of Indian manufacturing, which I'll teach you, and right now we'll not go into those details, but the real problem is the missing middle. That medium scale enterprises are missing, and the problem is of logistics and infrastructure. So unless you don't scale up the industry, and unless you don't promote more labor intensity with labor law reforms, etc., till then the workers' assimilation in industry will be suffering. All right, that is the aspect of it. Because don't forget that in all these numbers are hidden the large number of unorganized sector workers. You know, that is the hidden part. That unorganized sector workers still dominate in India. Imagine 83% of workforce still unorganized. So that means, okay, we can even consider that all these will be unorganized, but even among the rest 56, we see 37% unorganized, 39%. That's not good news, again. So that is the backward nature of the economy even now that we face. I'll tell you something there also. 52% people in India report that they are self-employed. That is PLFS data 2021, Periodic Labor Force Survey. 52% people, they report that they are self-employed. What is that self-employment? Is everybody now a startup developer? No, not only agriculture. People are selling fruits on their cart, self-employed. Employed in 20-meter shop, self-employed. Pakoda sellers, self-employed. Understand that. Rickshaw pullers, self-employed if they are not pulling a rickshaw for somebody on rent. Small tuition centers, self-employed. Small barber shop, self-employed. But that is low-level equilibrium. This self-employment is not because India has become a virtuous place for entrepreneurship suddenly. This self-employment has been dominant in India due to lack of other alternative. And that lack of other alternative, I repeat, comes from industry. Some of you can be engineers, and you might have seen, and some of you may not be engineers, but you may be seeing engineers around you. Mechanical engineer working in a software company. Why? Because there is no mechanical engineering job available. And why there is no mechanical engineering job available? Because you need manufacturing to grow for that. So be careful about it. You know, that what do we do and where do we land up? आप काफ़ी लोग इकोनॉमिक्स से ग्रेजुएशन किए, मास्टर्स कर चुके होगे, कुछ करोगे. अभी इकोनॉमिक्स अगर आप पढ़ते हो तो पढ़ते हुए ग्रेजुएशन डेज में इकोनॉमिक्स ही में आगे चूज करूं और करियर बनाऊं, इसके एवेन्यूज कहाँ देते हैं ज़्यादा? मैं तो दिल्ली स्कूल वालों को भी देखता हूं जो प्लेसमेंट्स हो रही हैं, मेरे जो बातचीत होती है वहाँ के प्रोफेसर्स से, उनसे यही सुनने को मिलता है कि जो प्लेसमेंट्स हो रही हैं दे आर मेनली इन फाइनेंशियल कंपनीज, द प्लेसमेंट्स आर इन क्रेडिट रेटिंग एजेंसीज, द प्लेसमेंट्स आर इन बैंक्स एंड सो ऑन. Perfect. So you become a good financial developer, or you can at best be a risk analyst. But that's far away from being an economist. but not the fault of the student. We are not training you to be an economist. That is the structural issue that we are confronting today. We will train you to be an engineer in mechanics. We can train you into a civil engineer. We can train you into an economist, provided we create that infrastructure in which you can be trained into that. If we don't train you to become that, we can't expect you to choose it as a career option. So understand it like this, that we don't incentivize you even to read all your readings. I mean, I feel sad. You might feel happy. I fully appreciate. But I feel sad that if you're given 20 readings in Indian Eco or 15 readings in Indian Eco in your final year, maybe 5th semester or 6th semester, you guys know that how to pick 7, 8 readings out of that and then safely attempt the examination. But then you guys would never know what was there in the other 6, 7 readings. So how would you analyze Indian economy in future any day if somebody is talking to you as an undergraduate? Because you have a degree of an undergraduate, but where is the knowledge base? And I'm not blaming you at all. Please don't take me negatively. I'm blaming the system which doesn't incentivize you to do it. We should incentivize you, force you to do that. I wanted to be an academician, so my methods used to be different. I didn't only read my readings, and that is helping me today at least in giving you all these numbers and otherwise. It helped me in my research also a lot. But I would not only read my readings, I would even read the readings mentioned in their bibliography. तो मैं ढूंढ के पढ़ता था, लाइब्रेरी में बैठ जाता था, ब्रिटिश लाइब्रेरी चला जाता था, कभी आर्काइव्स में घुस जाता था, तो ढूंढ के पढ़ता था. सिर्फ रीडिंग्स ही नहीं, और रीडिंग्स में लिखे होते थे ना बिब्लियोग्राफी, उन्होंने किसको रेफर किया, तो उन्होंने जिसको रेफर किया मैं वो भी पढ़ लेता था. एक टीचर्स रीडिंग होती थी, मैं वो भी पढ़ लेता था. तो वो क्योंकि मुझे ये लगता था ग्रेजुएशन पढ़ने ही आया हूँ, यही पढ़ूंगा. आई वॉज लकी, आई हैड अ बैड 12th. आई डिडंट डू एज गुड इन माई 12th. सो माई फर्स्ट ईयर ऑनवर्ड्स आई हैड दैट एक्स्ट्रा फायर, टू बी ऑनेस्ट. एंड थैंकफुली इट हेल्प. ये तुम्हें जानबूझ के समझा रहा हूँ कि कैसे मैनेज करना चाहिए. हैव एक्स्ट्रा फायर, but don't expect a lot immediately in your preparation also. Just go ahead preparing. With me, something very nice happened. First of all, everybody scared me that everybody fails in economics honors when I had taken my admission in first year graduation here. Later on, one more good thing happened. 2 months before the exam, everybody scared my mother in Patna that everybody fails in economics honors in DU. So she was very worried. She called me up. I went down to take her call. वो मोबाइल फोन का ज़माना था नहीं, कॉमन रूम में जाके हॉस्टल में कॉल लेना पड़ता था. So I went 2 floors down to take her call, and she said that please don't fail. And I felt very sad that day. I said, my God, see, she would say don't come second ever, and now she's saying please don't fail. But while coming up, it suddenly lit up a bulb in my head. I said, great, I don't only have to fail. So the whole pressure was gone. कि मुझे अच्छा करना है, फर्स्ट करना है, टॉप करना है, कुछ नहीं. मेरे दिमाग में आया फेल नहीं करना है. चलो लाइफ इजी है, बस फेल नहीं करता. और आपको मानेंगे नहीं, मैं अपना पेपर अटेम्प्ट करता था और पहले क्वेश्चन पेपर देखता था. 50 नंबर के पेपर होते थे हमारे टाइम पे, तो पहले क्वेश्चन पेपर देखता था और देखता था 20 आ रहे हैं या नहीं. तो बाकी लोग लिख रहे हैं, मैं काउंट कर रहा हूँ, मेरे 20 आ रहे हैं, फिर मैं खुश हो जाता था. 20 तो आ गए, हो गया, अब मैं पास हूँ. मॉम सेड जस्ट टू पास, एंड इट वर्कड वंडर्स फॉर मी. Because I did very well beyond anybody's expectation, including mine. I had not thought I'll be doing that well in the exam, in all the exams I took. And second year onwards, it again became a trouble. Because now people knew you. So they would come to you, they would tell you, oh, you did so great last time. And I developed it as a defense mechanism. No, I got to just pass. If I pass, I am happy. तो तुम्हें भी वही करना है. दिमाग में बस ये बिठाओ कि अच्छा ठीक है, प्रिपरेशन करना है, 50% ले आए, 45% ले आए, तो बहुत है. और तुम ले आओ 60% उसके बाद, कोई मना थोड़ी कर रहा है. But don't take the undue pressure of doing things. It helped me a lot, and trust me, it happened subconsciously, thanks to my mother, that she expected me to do the least common denominator. तो मुझे लगा चलो ग्रेट है, बस पास ही तो करना है. तो उसके पहले बहुत प्रेशर होता था मेरे ऊपर. आपके ऊपर भी होता होगा. जैसे आपके अगर कोई सिबलिंग है अच्छे, तो वो बच गए. मेरे ब्रदर थे, उन्होंने मेरे पेरेंट्स को बचपन में ही समझा दिया था कि वो एवरेज है, तो पेरेंट्स उनको कुछ कहते ही नहीं थे. He gets a 76% in his board exams, and my parents were tremendously happy. अरे इसके इतने नंबर आ गए 10th में, हमने तो सोचा ही नहीं था. I topped the state in CBSE, and still my mother was saying 2 नंबर साइंस में कैसे छूट गए तेरे. तो मैंने बोला भी भैया को, मैंने कहा तुमने बचपन में जो बाजी खेली, मैं मान गया तुम्हें कि तुमने सिखा दिया, मैं तो एवरेज हूँ. और एवरेज वो है नहीं, बस वो पढ़ते कम थे, लेकिन उनसे एक्सपेक्टेशन ही कम थी, तो नंबर भी कम आते थे, सब खुश. अब तुमने भी चूंकि यहाँ बैठे हो और पढ़ने में ठीक हो, तो तुमने अब वो तो हार गए हो. तुमने समझा दिया है घर में कि तुम पढ़ने में अच्छे हो, तो तुम गए. अब तुम्हारे पास वो ऑप्शन तो है नहीं कि तुम सडनली बोल सको कि नहीं मैं तो एवरेज हूँ, अब मैं कुछ भी बन जाऊँ, चपरासी वपरासी काम चल जाएगा. अब वो होगा नहीं. अब तो तुम IPS भी बन जाओगे. अभी विशाल मेरे बहुत अच्छे स्टूडेंट हैं, IPS बन गए. उनको किसी ने आकर यही कहा, जबकि उनकी पहली चॉइस IPS थी, but he got IPS. तो किसी ने बोला कितने नंबर आए, उन्होंने बताया, बोले ओह 20 और आ जाते तो तुम IAS बन जाते. So people don't leave you. You become one thing, people will be after you. तुम ये क्यों नहीं बने? So that's completely okay. That's life. But be prepared on these. But anyways, coming back to my Indian economy discussion with you, what I wanted to tell you was that whenever you look at Indian economy, unless we don't bridge this gap here, it's not going to help. And again, I repeat, it's not that manufacturing is not growing, but due to heavy impetus on services, services growth has been pretty fast, and that is reflecting here that absorption of employment is not happening in services. Any which way, I take you further. Then, so we start writing. You write features of growth in, changes in, features of changes in income structure, features of changes in income structure in the economy. Okay, there is one question that they ask us, that what should be the ideal figure for agricultural workforce? Ideally, you should not have more than 10% people in agricultural workforce in a country, because more than that is creating more burden on the economy. Remember, agriculture is the lesser productive one. If you look at developed economies today, say in America or a Britain or a Japan, then less than 2% are in agriculture. So gradually it has to move. If by chance you say, but sir, that will create food insecurity. No, with productivity you don't create food insecurity. Don't forget, 73% of India's workforce was in agriculture in 1951, and that comes down to 44% by 2021. But India's food grain production has risen 5 times compared to 1951. So there is something called productivity in this world. Don't forget that. All right? So reducing people in agriculture won't reduce food security, in case it comes to your mind. अविनाश, यहाँ एक माउस दे दोगे मुझे? 91 and 21, Akanksha, we will discuss it gradually. That will be a much better idea. Same thing, Mansi, let me discuss it with you. The skilling part of the workforce and so on. All right. Let's see this then. Now we first talk about the income structure, and then we will talk about the occupational structure. You write first point in that. The share of agriculture has consistently decreased. The share of agriculture has consistently decreased from 51% to 43% by 1971, and then to 29% by 1991. Then to 29% by 1991. This was mainly on account of relatively faster growth in industry and services compared to agriculture. Full stop. Agricultural share declined between 1951 to 1966, 1951 to 1966, from 53% to 41%, then due to Green Revolution, which increased food production drastically between 1966 to 1971, share of agriculture in GDP, stabilized around 42%. I hope you get the explanation of that. All right, I hope the language is explanatory, that agriculture share was declining quickly within 15 years, but then stabilized there for the next 6 years because of the Green Revolution pushing up agricultural production. In the same thing you write, second point, between 1971 and 1991, agricultural share kept declining with rise in rural industrialization, increased productivity of capital goods industry, rise in high value services, like nuclear energy, space research, etc., and very fast growth in financial sector, especially banking in India. Full stop. Overall, agricultural production continuously rose. Overall, agricultural production continuously rose in this entire time period. where food grain production increased to 150 million tons by 1991, and oilseed production doubled between 1985 and 1997, while milk production increased three times. Milk production increased three times between 1971 and 1998. Now I have to give you numbers like 95 and 97 or 98 because we have data available at them only. We don't have data for 91. So I'm giving you the data closest to the year 91 that we have had in this time period. Then you write the third point. Share of industries increased at a fast pace between 1951 to 1971 because of large scale investment by government in capital goods industry, and policy announcements by government promoting consumer goods industry in small scale sector. Full stop. Major contribution was observed through development of metals and minerals, petroleum refinery, industrial rollers. Industrial rollers is actually big industrial machines used for टेक्सटाइल रोलर्स, जूट रोलर्स. तो बड़े बड़े इंडस्ट्री की मशीन होती हैं ये, जो इंडस्ट्रियल सेक्टर में ही काम आती हैं. तो अभी के लिए आप बस ये लिख लो, इंडस्ट्रियल रोलर्स, ROLLERS, इंडस्ट्रियल रोलर्स, कमा, ऑटोमोबाइल, कमा, रेलवे वैगन बिल्डिंग, railway wagon building, steel and cement. Then you write SSI. SSI is for small scale industries. SSI did not show SSI did not show high growth due to lack of proper classification, I'll tell you what it means, lack of proper classification. Between 1951 and 1966, small scale industries were not even classified in India. Between 51 and 66, we didn't have any definition for what do we consider small scale. It was only in 1966 that for the first time, government came up with a definition of what is considered as small scale. So small scale was not even, defined well, and that was a reason where support was not reaching them. अगर सरकार कोई policy बनाते भी थे, तो पहुंचता नहीं था पूरी तरह से. The policy would not reach them because there was no classification that who is small scale. All right. In the same thing, you write lack of proper classification and poor technological inputs. And then you write next point, fourth, the period between 1971 to 1991 saw lesser increase in share of industry, as growth slowed down significantly in 1970s. The major contribution to industrial growth in this time period was by consumer goods industry. And I am assuming you recall the story that we have already done, that they were the days 70s and 80s when the consumer durables and consumer FMCG was growing much faster. All right, so in case you're writing something on only consumer goods industry or industrial development in India, then you can always add those points that you did there. That consumer goods industries grew mainly because of high demand with green revolution and spread of yellow revolution and all. Consumer goods industry grew also because of high income growth in urban areas which promoted their growth. So all these points you can bring forth, which we did when I was teaching you India's GDP trend and all. And then you write fifth point, service sector increased its share, service sector increased its share between 1951 to 1971 due to fast increase in transportation, in a bracket you write mainly road and railway, transportation, mainly road and railway. Close the bracket. When I say mainly road and railway, it is not about railway lines being set up or roads being built. That comes under construction and that's secondary sector. It is about new trains started, multiple routes begun. Single line था तो उसे double line कर दिया, double line थे तो triple line कर दिए, जो narrow gauge थे उनको broad gauge कर दिया. You understand that? This was the growth of railways से. Similarly in roadways, road transportation of bulk commodities was promoted, more new roads were developed, and now you could transport commodities from one state to another. Seamless transportation was done by that. In roadways, there was more impetus given on public transport with respect to state transport buses being run. Britishers would not do any of these. So the independent government was doing all this. All right, so in that case, there was state rate road transport buses, and there would be more transportation between cities and rural areas, and all that was promoting transportation to begin with. In the same thing, yes. 5 times. We don't have a data till 71, but between 51 and 2014, it has been 5 times that the capacity has increased. And that's around 400% then. 500% rather. FMCG and 1961 onwards, we have had data that how much is consumer durable and how much is the fast moving consumer good. All right, in fact, by extrapolation, we have developed data for 51 to 61 also. In the same thing, you write, so in transportation, communication was setting up post offices practically in every district of India, gradually spreading them to as close as possible to a village in India. All right, so we had village post offices set up, allowing those post offices to even accept deposits from people. I hope most of you would know that. So this was about developing more and more service sector with respect to communication. All right. Again, remember, India did not have a trunk call system for all. That started getting developed in India post 1951. Britishers would use it for official purpose. Trunk call is long distance dialing, and there were not days of STD and ISD and so on. There were days of trunk calls. So if you have to book a call, you'll book a trunk call and call up people long distance. So 1940s, this technology was developed that people could do long distance calling. But Britishers never introduced it in India. 1956, Indian government started it with an amendment to the Post and Telegraph Act. And then 1961 onwards, they started making it a common domain, at least among the rich of India. But the costs were very high. Try understanding this. So if you booked a 1-minute trunk call from say Delhi, Mumbai, you would be paying in those days, 1960s, you would be paying close to around 200 rupees for that. Now, it was costly, but then it meant it was value addition, because high value service was there. And many people were using it for business purposes, for transaction purposes. So it was not still a common consumer thing, but business purposes. And gradually as the consumer base increased, by mid-1960s, early 1970s, government opened it up for common people. that common people can talk. The rates were still very high, but now a lot of trunk call started getting made. आप 1970s की मूवी देखना, आपको दिखेगा जो लॉन्ग डिस्टेंस कॉल दिखाएंगे चिल्ला चिल्ला के बोलते हैं उसमें, देखना बहुत ज़्यादा, क्योंकि ट्रंक कॉल पे यही होता था, आपको बहुत जोर से बोलना पड़ता था. There would be a lot of disturbance otherwise, and suddenly it would get disconnected. Then you had to call back again, and this system remained in India till 1984-85. It was only in 1985 we started laying optic fiber cables, and Rajiv Gandhi ji liberalized the telecom system entirely, and then we had the STD ISD booth and all that we saw. And then the trunk call system gradually went away. वो trunk call का system ही खत्म हो गया STD ISD booth आने के बाद. इनफैक्ट एक फनी बात होती थी 1980s अर्ली 90s में, जिनको ट्रंक कॉल पे बात करने की आदत थी पुराने समय के लोग, उनको अगर आप कहते थे बाहर से फोन आया है तो एसटीडी पे जरूरत नहीं था इतना चिल्लाने का, वो उस पर भी चिल्ला के बात करते थे. दे वुड शाउट एंड टॉक, देन दे हैड टू बी टोल्ड दैट यू विल बी हर्ड एनीवेज, यू डोंट वरी. सो दे हैड अ हैबिट लाइक दिस. सो communication, but communication development in India was also pretty fast post the British left us. And then in the same thing you write, put a comma, so transportation, communication, internal trade, in a bracket you write, there was significant decline observed in external trade in India. There was significant decline observed in external trade in India. So external trade we saw a decline. Internal trade we saw things happening much better. Close the bracket. So internal trade, close the bracket after India, then write, put a comma. Improved services on broadcasting. First time India started broadcasting on its own, the radio channels and the television channels, and that was again creating value. And then you write, and increase in governance activities like public administration. And then change the paragraph. You write the next point, actually, you write service sector. Oh, yes, sixth point. Service sector recorded an even faster growth. Service sector recorded an even faster growth between 1971 to 1991, mainly due to fast growth in banking, comma, aviation. In fact, 71 to 91, this was another sector which was picking up in India. High demand for aviation, mainly by corporates and government, for their people to fly. So Air India flights and there were two airlines, Air India and Indian Airlines. So Air India flights increased by more than 300% between 71 and 91, and Indian Airlines flights also increased by more than 200% in 71 to 91. So there was very fast growth seen in this time period, mainly suggesting the rising income levels in India among the rich, which could also suggest inequality, but we don't have good data on that. But rising income levels in India among the rich and rising cost of time for them. So they started using more aircraft than the railway trains that they would use earlier. All right. So you write aviation, comma, telecommunication, telecommunication and retail services. Full stop. Some increase was observed. Some increase was observed in Western India, mainly it was Maharashtra and Gujarat. In Western India, in real estate services. Western India, in real estate services. Because the government had started liberalizing real estate here. So that was the time when Mumbai started making multi-storied building and Gujarat started liberalizing its land laws. And that resulted in very high growth of real estate both in Maharashtra and in Gujarat. So that was again something that was contributing to service sector growth. Other services were growing, but most of the people say that these other services were also trading. So I did not make you write that separately. But other services were also found to be growing in India. Because in those days we did not have a lot of culture of small shops and all. We had rather. So many people said it's small shops which got recorded as other services because they did not supply one commodity. They would sell multiple commodities together. All right, so they couldn't get qualified as only an FMCG shop or only say an automobile component shop. Everything will be kept in these shops, especially in smaller regions of India. But this was again a factor that was pushing growth. So in case they ask you a question on economic structure, this is from where you have to pick it up. All right, and the analysis of income structure. Now there is another 150 words I'm giving you on changes in occupational structure in India, mainly focusing on how agriculture share went down, but not significantly. That is the key factor here. जब भी कुछ पूछेंगे तो यही बात पे आती है घूम कर बात. Yes, yes. Yep, so it's approximate, 53% and 42%. Maybe I mixed it up. So it should be 53%. 53% and 51 to 42%. All right. Okay, like this is the number that you should keep in mind. Okay, now see, when we talk about occupational structure, you just give a heading, evolution of occupational structure in India. Evolution of occupational structure in India. Cement, steel and cement, Samyak. All right, now when we talk about evolution here, see the real talking points are, we are ignoring this, I'm sure you understand. This I just gave it for your understanding. So the major talking point is this, why we did not have shift. And the other talking point is very low level of industrial share throughout. Services, you expect this to happen. All right, so the major talking point will remain mainly this, around 80 words on this only, and then that will be complemented by why this was happening. All right, so that is what occupational structure showed in India, that it didn't evolve at all. All right, why do you need an evolution in occupational structure? I gave you an answer in the first two classes, by chance if you recall. What happens when occupational structure changes? What happens when people come out of agriculture? Where do they go? Say they go to industries, so what? What will happen then? They develop, okay, demand can rise. Okay, that's one part of course, that their income will rise, productivity will rise, they consume more, save more. Better use of that's, yeah, okay, productivity rises. Standard of living rises, all right. in industry. I mean, disguised unemployment is more seen in agriculture. You know, we'll discuss this in some detail, but I'll give you a point which I wanted you to think over. Your points are not incorrect. What you are saying is absolutely fine, that it will promote good standard of living, it promotes demand, makes the workers more productive. Of course it happens. Biggest point is, it creates a link where you start developing modernization of economy. Unless people are not taken out of agriculture, the backwardness of economy continues. Understand it like this. What kind of system will create high growth? A system which has aspirational mechanisms. But what kind of aspirations can you develop? अच्छा चलो मैं इसको और आसान बना देता हूँ. आप में से कोई या हम में से कोई, मैं भी इंक्लूडेड हूँ, हम में से कोई एस्ट्रोनॉट बनेगा ऐसा क्यों नहीं सोचता? मैंने तो सोचा भी नहीं कभी. साइंस का स्टूडेंट था मैं 11th-12th तक, बट हिम्मत ही नहीं थी. Yeah, correct. I see similar answers coming from you also. Unorganized to organized sector can also be one. Backward and forward linkages. Fair enough. क्यों नहीं बनते हम? एस्ट्रोनॉट क्यों नहीं बनना चाहते? या कोई फुटबॉलर नहीं बनने की सोचते? बड़े होते हुए एक होता है ना, मैं फुटबॉलर बन जाऊंगा, एस्ट्रोनॉट बन जाऊंगा. अपॉर्चुनिटीज कम है. पता भी है कैसे बनेंगे, ट्रेनिंग नहीं है. अच्छा चलो, कुछ चीजों की ट्रेनिंग है, वो भी हम नहीं बनना चाहते, जैसे सिनेमाटोग्राफर. नहीं, जैसे मैं एक बात सोचता हूं, आप सोच के देखिए, देयर इज अ प्रॉपर थिंग कॉल्ड फिल्म टेक्निकल इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ इंडिया, FTII है ना. जगह जगह प्राइवेट सेक्टर भी है अब तो. एक्टिंग सिखा रहे हैं, सिनेमाटोग्राफी सिखा रहे हैं, लिखना सिखा रहे हैं. पर आप अगर घर जाके आज बोले मैं डीजे बनना चाहता हूं, आपका डीजे वहीं बच जाएगा. It's normal. You know, what I'm trying to teach you is, please understand, and I'll not stretch it more, but I wanted you to understand, a rural economy remains backed up by a feudal system. And a feudal system is used to keeping their people on the top. But these are all sectors where I talk to you, where there is uncertainty and you got to struggle. So if you got to struggle for uncertainty, try struggling at that place where you can at least promise to be on the top the way you guys are struggling. तुम IAS ही बनने क्यों आए? तुमने ये नहीं सोचा कभी उसकी कौन सी ट्रेनिंग है बहुत ज्यादा? हम जैसे कुछ लोग पढ़ा देते हैं पता नहीं क्या क्या. IAS बनने की सोच ली, उसमें कम रिस्क है क्या? जब हम बोलते हैं रिस्क की बात है, नौकरी कम है, इसमें कौन सा है? नहीं, पैसा चोरी के पैसा कमा सकते हो, वरना पैसा तो तुम्हें ज्यादा मिल जाएगा प्रोफेशनल बन के. चोरी नहीं करोगे ऐसे मान रहा हूं, और अगर तुम मानते हो उल्टा तो अलग बात है, ठीक है. लेकिन अगर ईमानदारी के पैसे कमाओगे तो IAS बनने में कैसे ज्यादा पैसे आएंगे? एक लिमिटेड सैलरी है, अच्छे पर्क्स हैं, अच्छी सैलरी है, ये नहीं कह रहा हूं कम सैलरी है, लिमिटेड सैलरी है. लेकिन क्यों हम बनना चाहते हैं? और ये बिल्कुल मैं ट्रिवियल डिबेट नहीं कर रहा. आई एम डूइंग अ सिंसियर डिबेट विथ यू दैट व्हाई इज योर करियर चॉइस of a civil servant, of a bureaucrat. Okay, one thing, and be honest on that, one thing apart from good salary package is a good social stature. तुम तैयारी करते हुए ही रिकॉग्नाइज होने लगे ना. बनो या ना बनो, वो फ्यूचर में है. लेकिन अभी तुम्हारी बहुत पूछ हो रही है. सोचो अगर इसकी जगह पे तुम एक होटल मैनेजमेंट की तैयारी करने के बाद किसी होटल में अभी इंटर्नशिप कर रहे होते और लोगों के प्लेट्स उठा रहे होते. अब 10 साल बाद वो प्लेट उठाते हुए तुमने शुरू किया एक होटल BTW और तुम बन गए एक 300 करोड़ रुपीस के बिजनेस के चेयरमैन. पर ये होने में तो 20 साल 25 साल लगेंगे. सोसाइटी तुम्हें थोड़ी ग्लोरीफाई करेगी. सोसाइटी तो ग्लोरीफाई करेगी जब बन जाओगे वो चेयरमैन. और उसके बाद भी हो सकता है आसपास में कुछ लोग हैं जो बोला रहे तो बिजनेस करता है, ऐसा कुछ खास नहीं. हाँ, वो बिजनेस करते हुए अगर तुम्हारे पॉलिटिकल कनेक्ट्स हो गए, जिसमें तुम किसी का लाइसेंस बनवा दोगे, किसी का पेपर पास करवा दोगे, तो सडनली तुम्हारी इंपॉर्टेंस और बढ़ जाएगी. अब ये कैसी इकोनॉमी है हमारी, जहां हम अपने यूथ को क्या बनाना चाहते हैं? कुछ इसलिए बन जाओ क्योंकि तुम किसी का पेपर पास करा दो, कुछ बन जाओ क्या ताकि तुम्हारे हाथ में कुछ कंट्रोल आ जाए. ये हमने अपने यूथ को ट्रेनिंग दी, तो एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप कहां से आएगी? अब ये मिसिंग ट्रेनिंग क्यों है? क्योंकि एग्रीकल्चर में डोमिनेंट कौन होते हैं? हु आर द डोमिनेंट वंस इन एग्रीकल्चर? द फ्यूडलिस्टिक लैंडलॉर्ड. नाउ द फ्यूडलिस्टिक लैंडलॉर्ड इज लुक्ड अप टू. Oh, this fellow with so much land, he has so much authority, the village respects the person. So we attach respect, please understand it carefully. In a rural system, agriculture based, we attach respect with power and not with innovation. Now, what is the alternate to power in rural areas in an urban area? Be in bureaucracy. You're powerful. Everybody starts attaching respect to that. As a youth, what will you aspire for? Respect. Understand this. You got to be a minion to aspire for something else. Have you seen Minions? Yeah. Banana is what they aspire for. They were asked, what do you want? Respect, authority? They said, banana. You know? So they went for bananas. That's okay. But you aspire for respect, and respect comes by qualifying an exam, and you are good brains. So you say, great, I need respect, I need a good salary, I need a good background, I need authority, and I get everything if I qualify this exam. Let's risk it. American youths are opposite. They don't give as much respect to the bureaucracy over there. These guys will set up 10 failed startups before they get a successful one, if they get one. But right from undergraduate days, they're into startups. It's about whom you grow up with, what you grow up in a system. And again, I repeat, a rural system in an agricultural mechanism, backed by most of the people in agriculture, will put the aspirations in the same manner. So the transition to a modern system like innovation, entrepreneurship, this is transition to modern. आप इनोवेटर बन जाओ, एंटरप्रेन्योर बन जाओ. एलॉन मस्क का इंडिया में होने का संभावना बहुत कम है ना, इसलिए तो सुंदर पिचाई गूगल के सीईओ बन गए वहां जाके. उनका दिमाग तो ऐसा है कि वो यहां भी एक गूगल क्रिएट कर सकते थे, बट इंडिया उनको वो एस्पिरेशन नहीं दे रहा, वो पॉसिबिलिटी नहीं दे रहा, तो उधर चले गए वो. ठीक बात है, वो उनकी एक, ये मैं आपको अपने जो इकोनॉमिक रिसर्च एंड इंडिया को स्टडी किया मैं उसका नटशेल शेयर कर रहा हूं आपके साथ, कि ये एक बहुत बड़ा चक्कर है हमारे यहाँ. That agriculture dominates, feudal system dominates, so even the aspirations are feudalistic in nature. You know, they are there. So we don't believe in equity in that sense. ऐसा नहीं कि हम equitable हैं. हमें लगता है अच्छा, अब देखना आपके मन में कभी कभी आता होगा, जरूरी नहीं आता हो, लेकिन किसी के, कुछ लोगों के मन में आ सकता है, हाँ ठीक है, एक दिन मेरा वक्त लेके उनको मिलना पड़ेगा मुझसे. So, अब ये क्यों आता है? क्योंकि तुम्हें लगता है दिखा दूंगा अपने पावर से. अब यही तो डिफीटिस्ट है. तब तक इक्विटी कैसे आएगी? तुम तो पावरफुल होना चाहते हो, एंड पावर इज अ रिलेटिव कंसेप्ट. अगर मैं पावरफुल हूं तो कोई तो वीक होगा. अगर सभी पावरफुल हैं तो फिर पावर कैसे पता चलेगी? और अगर सोशलिस्ट सोसाइटी बनाना चाहते हो तब तो सभी पावरफुल होने चाहिए, फिर एक का पावर कैसे पता चलेगा? Somebody has to be bad for somebody else to be good. Because they are relative terms. And if all are good, then there is no issue in that. Then the good feels average. So please be careful in that when you talk about an agricultural system, now what does that do? Then what is our expenditure on research and development? Very less. You see that? Not because we don't have the money, but we don't have the intention to spend there. तो इंडिया का R&D पे expenditure 1% of GDP से भी कम है. So why are we spending less than 1% of our GDP on R&D? Because we are not interested in R&D majorly. There is again no aspiration about it. और नोबेल प्राइज जीत लो, अमेरिकन यूनिवर्सिटी में पढ़ा लो, तो इंडियन मार्केट्स में तो आपका को थोड़ा चर्चा हो सकता है. लेकिन हमने अपने बच्चों को वो नहीं उस तरफ पुश किया कि नहीं तुम एकेडमिशियन बन जाओ, रिसर्चर बन जाओ, तुम्हारे लिए थिंक टैंक्स बना देंगे और वो थिंक टैंक में बैठ के तुम रिसर्च करो और नई चीजें ढूंढ के लाओ. हमने वो एस्पिरेशन नहीं दिया अपने बच्चों को, वो नहीं हुए. क्यों? क्योंकि वो सर्विस है जो मैन्युफैक्चरिंग के बाद आता है. इसीलिए मैंने आपसे ये सवाल पूछा था दैट इफ यू रिमेन डिपेंडेंट ऑन एग्रीकल्चर एंड इफ मोर देन 60% पीपल आर इन एग्रीकल्चर, then the aspirations of the economy will be feudalistic in nature. And it doesn't mean bureaucracy is a bad idea. You have some very dynamic people working in bureaucracy. Otherwise, Indian bureaucracy wouldn't have done this well. It's doing pretty good for itself. You have some very dynamic people in it. But those dynamic people could have been equally well in many other sectors of this country. rather than being only in bureaucracy, but the country doesn't encourage them to go elsewhere. And why doesn't it do that? Again, I repeat, because the power comes in one place, so people are chasing that. So please understand it in that context. लिटरेटोर को वैल्यू देने लगो, लोग लिटरेटोर बनना चाहते हैं फिर उस कंट्री में. क्रिएटिव राइटिंग का कोई कोर्स ठीक से इंडिया में नहीं है. क्यों नहीं है? क्योंकि कोई बच्चे अपने पेरेंट्स को ये थोड़ी बोलेंगे मैं राइटर बनूंगा बड़े होकर. अरे लट्टू की तरह घुमा दिया जाएगा उनको, राइटर बनेगा, सेल्फ पब्लिश करूंगा खुद को मैं राइटिंग करके. कोई नहीं खरीदा तो भी कोई बात नहीं, 2-4 किताबें तो लिखूंगा ही. नहीं, हम क्रिएटिविटी तो नहीं डेवलप करते, तो क्रिएटिव राइटिंग का कोर्स नहीं है. अब वो कोर्स नहीं है तो वर्ल्ड क्लास राइटर्स नहीं है. वो तो सारी चीजें बाय प्रैक्टिस है, बाय ट्रेनिंग है. ऐसा थोड़ी है कोई सडनली उठे एक दिन और राइटर बन गए, ये नहीं होता है. उसके लिए बहुत ब्रिलियंट होना पड़ता है. उतने ब्रिलियंट होना नॉर्मल आदमी के लिए पॉसिबल नहीं है, लेकिन सीख सकते हैं लोग वो करना. और ये सब बातें तो तब सीखेंगे ना, यू विल गो टुवर्ड्स दीज डायरेक्शंस व्हेन द सोशल सिस्टम. नाउ आई एम कमिंग टू सेकंड इंपॉर्टेंट पॉइंट ऑफ माइन. सोशल सिस्टम अलाउज यू टू एक्सपेरिमेंट. नाउ इफ यू डोंट एक्सपेरिमेंट, you don't innovate, and you don't go for entrepreneurship, then how will you be a pioneer in any commodity? Then how can you be a world leader? Understand that. वर्ल्ड लीडरशिप भी फिर नहीं आएगी. वर्ल्ड लीडरशिप किसको आती है? जो कुछ नया इन्वेंट कर देना, सरप्राइज करें वर्ल्ड को, देखो मैं ये लेकर आया हूं. तो वो तो सरप्राइज तुम तब करोगे जब आप बैकग्राउंड बनाओ उस तरह का, आपके गुड ब्रेन्स लगे हो उस रिसर्च में. बट वो तब लगेंगे जब आप उनको रिकग्निशन दो उस रिसर्च का. सो यू गॉट टू बी केयरफुल देयर that an agricultural based economy then leaves its chances of fast paced development till it doesn't transform from agricultural occupational structure to an industrial and then to a service led occupational structure. That is the aspect of it. तभी तो जैसे कपिल देव ने बोला, और वो गलत नहीं कह रहे थे अपने कंटेक्स्ट में, कि मुझे समझ नहीं आता डिप्रेशन क्या होता है. क्योंकि हमें समझ नहीं आता डिप्रेशन क्या होता है. हमें, आपको, हमें सबको, हमें पता ही नहीं चलता. अब देखना आपके साथ जब ये होता है कि आप 5 दिन पढ़े और 2 दिन नहीं पढ़ पाए. अभी जैसे 2 दिन 3 दिन से अगर आप मस्ती कर रहे हो, ये बड़ा मजा आ रहा है, तो गाड़ी चला रहे हो अपनी मर्जी में, अब देखना टेबल पे जाना थोड़ा मुश्किल होगा. अब अगर ये टेबल पे जाने के लिए अगर आपको एक एंड्रॉइड पे हेल्प मिल जाए, जहां आप एक नंबर डायल करो और वो आपको बता दें, दे टॉक टू यू एंड दे टेल यू, लुक यू मस्ट बी गोइंग थ्रू दिस इन योर माइंड. So if you can change this in your mind and rather start thinking in another way, then you will be in a position to study quickly. That's an extra help called mental conditioning. But for that you need to understand first of all that you need mental conditioning. But we don't even understand we need mental conditioning. We feel no, I'm just disturbed maybe. No, it is just that you are not able to plan at the moment because you need somebody's help who understands you and plans for you. अब ये तो वो इकोनॉमी समझेंगे ना जो डेवलप्ड है, जिनके यहाँ ग्रोथ हो चुके हैं सेक्टर्स के. एक एग्रीकल्चरल इकोनॉमी में ये बात नहीं समझ में आती है, क्योंकि आपके प्रेशर्स नहीं समझ में आते हैं ठीक से लोगों के. आपको खुद को नहीं पता चलता कि ठीक है ये प्रेशर वर्क कर रहा है. आप देखना 2 दिन जब नहीं पढ़ते हो तो उसके बाद 2 दिन और नहीं पढ़ते हो, उस दुख के मारे कि हम 2 दिन नहीं पढ़े. ये कुछ नहीं है, ये मेंटल फाइट है, ये तुम्हें करना है. माइंड को समझाना है कि नहीं 2 दिन नहीं पढ़े हैं, कोई बात नहीं, आज से शुरू कर लेते हैं. तो शुरू में दिक्कत पहले देख, and I'm not joking, I'm saying it with all the experience I have as a teacher and some as a student, that your initial half an hour is the biggest trouble while studying. And you know what is the biggest problem in that? You have fed the mind, I am studying, I am working, I got to be sad about it. It's not something fun. You feed the mind it's fun, have some fun in your mind, find fun in that, and you will see that you will study more hours than what you would otherwise. But if you keep feeding yourself, what will be my return? It's like me sitting here and thinking, what will be my return? How much money will I make? What are these guys listening? Why are they listening? Why do they have doubts? My God, this doubt is not included in my teaching hour. Then what am I doing? I'm not enjoying you. But somebody got to condition me to think like that if I don't know. So please be very careful. ये चीजें हैं developed systemic thinking economy के aspects. ये feudalistic economy में आता ही नहीं है. Feudalism is all about power. The one who has more power will dominate. But human development is beyond power. So please be careful. That's why I asked you this question. And again, I repeat, whatever you answered were all correct. No doubt about it. But the key is shifting from, और कैसे आया इंडस्ट्रियल रिवॉल्यूशन के बाद क्या हुआ यूरोप में? फ्यूडलिज्म से कैपिटलिज्म डोमिनेट कर गया ना, लेकिन बीच में क्या हुआ था जिसकी वजह से इंडस्ट्रियल रिवॉल्यूशन आया? What happened between 1650 and 1750 in places like Britain, especially, that they shifted to capitalism or had an industrial revolution? That's something called mercantilism. The beheading of Charles II, 1648, which meant that the king is losing power. The invasion by William the Orange, 1679, which meant that feudal power was further compromised. And William the Orange invaded England on whose invitation? The merchants of England. Introduction of democracy in England, 1716. Sir Robert Walpole becoming the first prime minister in 1720. And who was Sir Robert Walpole? A merchant. What did merchants need? More production to make trade and grow further. Bigger ships, better ships, which could go far distance, beating the Spaniards and the Portuguese. Who will help in that? Somebody who could invest in invention. And who could do that? The merchant themselves. Whom were they looking for? The intellectuals who could do the research for them, resulting in a James Watt steam engine. Learn to connect history and the dots to understand why did some country do well and some others did not. It's not only history, it's all teaching that it gives us that, okay, this happened in that country. And why could England get it done? Because they had the Protestant movement. Why did they have the Protestant movement? Because they had the Renaissance accompanying it. What was one thing about Protestantism and Renaissance which happened in England and France to begin with and did not happen in Italy? Or Italy तो था ही नहीं उस वक्त, चर्च का रोमन सिस्टम था, Vatican Empire. But what was missing in Spain, Portugal or Vatican, which was there in England or France? Somebody has any idea? I have doubts, I understand. आप उतने डिटेल में तो गए नहीं. हाँ, yes. How about land holdings in these areas? No, you know what? A significant part was played by land holding distribution. England and France had land, especially England, had land holdings which were not feudalistic, much of it, because England did not have too much land. So their land holding distribution was more like medium scale farming. Unlike Spain, Portugal, etc., where there was large scale farming, so kind of a pseudo zamindari existed there. Not in England or France. So what happens in England is, these guys know that they will get rich or they will get better off only when they conquer land, and they can conquer land only when they are better than others, and that can happen only by their merchants going abroad. So you would see the British East India Company was one of the first ones which started exploring abroad, apart from the Dutch East India Company and the French East India Company. But you would never hear a Spanish East India Company very easily. You understand that? Yes. So when you look at these East India Company, why Dutch, why French, why England? Because they knew trade will get them money. So mercantilism started happening here first. And merchants needed more knowledge about outside, more knowledge meant more dynamism, and that started growing. What I'm trying to just connect for you is that these places started leaving the feudalistic vestiges much earlier than what a Spain, Portugal or Vatican could do. They are not same, but it was similar to the South America, North America, polarization. South Americans were more feudalistic, depended on land, extensive farming. North America was more, developed, comparatively more research, more commercially oriented, more trade with Europe, etc. And that meant North America started rising faster. And I mean within Americas, the Northern America and the Southern America, So Texas and Minnesota, they were growing slower, and the northern part, Boston, etc., was growing faster, creating a civil war finally, because their interests varied. And that is, don't forget that the Civil War, after giving freedom to North Americans to unleash themselves fully, created the second industrial revolution of 1870s, with all the robber barons, Thomas Alva Edison, Rockefeller, etc., bringing in their research and development and growing very quick. So please understand, when the economies start coming out of their agricultural background, that is when they see their real growth. Because that feudalistic system gets broken. It was not that it was fully broken. South Americans came back, of course, and came back hard. They had their own rules, Freds and Tools rules and all. But North America by then had broken the shackle and had started growing due to innovation. तो बस इतनी देर से आपका सिर इसलिए खा रहा था कि आपको एक कनेक्ट समझा सकूं. I wanted you to understand a connect. Feudalism and innovation don't go together, and agricultural dominance in workforce and feudalism always go together. So if we want innovation to become the benchmark, then agricultural dominance in workforce has to be removed. I hope this part can be kept in mind. Okay, we work it out. You write now in this. Again, you can write it in paragraphs. So you write the first one. Occupational structure in India showed static development, in between 1951 to 1971, where proportion of population in agriculture remained almost same, full stop. It did not change significantly. Between 1971 and 1991, full stop. The share of industry remained even lesser than services throughout this time period. Full stop. Then you write the second point. Large proportion of workforce was in agriculture due to following reasons. And you write A, lack of training among workers, to shift to other sectors, to shift to other sectors. This was one big block, that workers were not trained to shift to other sectors. B, lack of connectivity, and information, resulted in large number of people remaining disguisedly unemployed. Third, poor development of infrastructure, in rural areas, which discouraged new business establishments, and then you write one more. Spread of technological revolution improved agricultural income. By technological revolution, I mean green, yellow, and white, all the three. So spread of technological revolution improved agricultural income and discouraged large-scale shift to other sectors. Again, change the paragraph and write, the share of industries remained low. The share of industries remained low due to following reasons. A, rigid labor laws in India. Especially after 1970s. Discouraged labor employment. In fact, I'll tell you something interesting there. In 1979, a research paper found, this research paper was done by World Bank in India, that India's steel industry was more capital intensive than even Japan's steel industry. So India's steel production was done with more capital intensity than even Japan's steel intensity, while Japan was a capital surplus country and we were a labor surplus country. So this was found by World Bank in 1979. So that showed how industrialists were not favoring hiring workers, and there was major favor on using machines. There was one more reason why they used machines. मैं आपको भी first point के साथ ही वो लिखवाऊंगा. Lot of interest subsidy given on loans that industrialists would seek. So now imagine if you're making workers difficult to hire and you're taking machines cheaper, you're incentivizing me to go for machines and not hire workers. You understand that? So in the same thing you write, same point, it was further compounded. It was further compounded by cheaper credit available under various government schemes for the industrialist. Then you write B. The focus of development was on large scale capital intensive growth. I'm repeating myself. The focus of development was on large scale capital intensive growth, which led to less employment generation in industries. Third, you write, the policies discouraged small scale units. How did they discourage it? I will teach you that when I'm teaching you small scale units. But one example I can give you, government reserved commodities for exclusive production by small scale. अब समझना ये बात ध्यान से. तो सरकार कहते हैं, the government says, particular commodities can be produced only by small scale, and then they define small scale in 1976 as all those industries which have an investment of less than 20 lakh rupees. Now, what that means is that I know that if I invest more than 20 lakh rupees, I lose the category of small scale, and I don't grow because of that. While above 20 lakh, you don't become large scale anyways. But we had no definition for something called medium scale. You understand that? So we had cottage industries and small scale industries. And once you crossed the threshold of small scale industries, then you qualified as a large scale industry. But the problem is that the large scale industry can mean people ranging from then 25 lakh to say 50 crore. Now, as a 25 lakh rupees investment industry, I have no chance of competing with somebody at 50 crore. So what do? I choose not to grow beyond 20 lakhs. And I remain small. But if I remain small, how will I hire people beyond a limit? Because very small units, if you recall, in the earlier discussion I had told you, even now India has 6 crore plus industries, small scale industries, and we are hiring only 11 crore plus people. The ratio is still not 2:1. And that's still the problem of missing middle persists. So we need to be careful that we create an organic system in which industries should feel incentivized to grow. That okay, I'll be micro, small, medium, and then grow gradually to be large, and the incentives will be on the basis of my growth, and the incentive should not be on the basis of my size alone. So this became again a factor due to which many industries didn't grow. And if they don't grow, how do they hire? So you write in that, you wrote small scale units, which led to, in the same thing you continue, which led to lack of development of medium scale enterprises and discouraged growth. Then change the paragraph and write, employment in service sector, employment in service sector was mainly on account of, was mainly on account the idea is that the discouragement was to grow. It kind of perpetuated. Last 1 minute. Can I? Okay, so online people, if you missed last 1 minute, we can do one thing. maybe one of us can share the notes with you because I was only dictating. So don't worry at all. मैं कुछ नहीं समझा रहा था, मैं ईश्वर की शपथ खा के कहता हूँ. मैं बस dictate कर रहा था. So in case you missed the things, what we can do is, can one of you just take the picture just now and post it on the group? That helps. Who can do that? Okay, perfect. So do it now. वो अभी कर लोगे ना तो अच्छा है, सबको तसल्ली हो जाएगी. So we are just posting it on the group from here. Don't worry at all. In case you are unable to hear me. All right. अब आया, ठीक है. Okay, so don't worry at all. Whatever you missed, we are just posting it on the group, taking the picture. So in that case, it will help you get whatever you were left with. पिछले एक पेज का ही करके रख देना please उसके ऊपर. Yes, yes. Okay, so I'll tell you quickly. I'll answer this question because I have one more thing to finish with you. See, actually, 16th, 15th, 14th century were days when you flourished with your agricultural development. India had fertile land, good agricultural possibilities. We flourished with that, and we had the handicraft system, which did not need technology. You understand that? Like it didn't need a huge technology, it didn't need huge innovations. So we flourished in that process. It needed good patrons. It needed good support from someone. Now the royalty was giving that support, being that patron. So whether muslin from Dhaka, etc., and all, or cowrie shells from southern India, they were all much in demand across the world, and these people could grow because they were supported by their kings. So that feudalism was not a problem till you did not have industrial revolutions. Because no other country was having it too. You understand that? I was trying to explain to you why we didn't have industrial revolutions and those guys had it. It was not that we were not educated and they were more educated. It was also not that we had not seen the world and they had seen the world. But it was just that the structure was not promoting industrial revolution in India. So in a feudalistic structure, you can look at Europe between 12th century and 15th century. They were far behind us. But they were far behind us because socially they were like us. But their land was not as fertile. You see that? So they could not grow as much as what we could grow. They didn't have as good rivers as what we had. The tropical climate was missing in their system. So they remained behind the curve. But look at the way and that is why Spain, Portugal kind of grew better because they were still closer to the tropics. So they could do better in those days. So climate played the geography played a big role then. Industrial revolution broke the idea of geography. That started making science play a bigger role. And science played a bigger role in those countries which were already innovative in nature. It still does. Some of you would be more, for the lack of a better word I'm using it, but more intelligent than others for a simple reason that you are more innovative than others. Why do Indian students become world beaters gradually? हमारा education system तो पूरी कोशिश करता है हमें खराब करने की. फिर भी हम ठीक क्यों हो जाते हैं? हम ठीक इसलिए हो जाते हैं as Indian students क्योंकि हम शुरू से ही adapt करते रहते हैं. We keep adapting. Sometimes our teachers come, they teach us things, we don't get a lot of things, but then we try adapting so that we know them, so that we can kind of, put it back on the paper. That is where the brain is working. Parents get very strict at times, so we are adapting how to manage them and still get our work done. That is all, it's all about that. अब जैसे मैं छोटा था, मेरे मदर बहुत स्ट्रिक्ट थे, बहुत भी अंडरस्टेटमेंट है, तो काफ़ी ज़बरदस्त कंट्रोल रखते थे हम दोनों भाइयों पे. तो हमें कुछ अगर चाहिए था तो हमारी 2-3 दिन पहले से मेंटल प्लानिंग शुरू हो जाती थी. क्या बात करनी है, कैसे रखना है, क्या कहेंगे. पर अच्छा है, वो क्रिएटिविटी ग्रो करवाता है. इट मेक्स यू क्रिएटिव, मेक्स योर ब्रेन फंक्शन. वी रियलाइज्ड इट लॉन्ग लेटर व्हेन वी वर रीडिंग बुक्स ऑन साइकोलॉजी. That is how we became creative. So Indian system, it goes like that. Many things happen on place and you're doing this, you're doing X, Y, you're living in a joint family, you're managing that joint family at times. Some people you may not like, but you still live up to them. and so on. You don't challenge them much, mainly because you feel, okay, why disturb the equilibrium in the family? And that gives you patience, and that allows you again to grow better. So we have our own system of developing that. But my point is that is not something where we are trained properly. We are trained by outside. In US kind of a place, where or Europe also, they train their children in how to adapt, how to be emotionally more alert, how to understand what's happening around. And that training, if we can give our children, then I believe Indian children are no less. मैं हमेशा ये बात कहता हूँ that we guys lose as compared to them in our college days. Till school, we are far superior to them. It is college that takes away the power to study at times, engages us in so many other things. And that is where they start beating us, because that they start doing much more in their college days. In their schools, they're not doing much. So it's all about, how you let the mind think. अब तुम सोचो तुम्हें अगर शुरू से regiment कर, मैं समझ रहा हूँ, मैं समझाना मुश्किल है ये बात, but I'll try explaining it to you in one line quickly. Imagine if you are regimented even to think about an essay as being right or wrong. An essay cannot be right or wrong. It's my thought process. I just wrote it. But somebody says, no, you wrote a wrong essay. Wrong essay means what? I mean, this is my thought. Allow me to have my thought. You can debate the merits or demerits of my language. You can debate the merits and demerits of my thought integration. You can debate the merits and demerits of sequentialization of thoughts. That I can understand. ये पहले आना चाहिए था, ये बाद में आना चाहिए था. But ये कहना कि नहीं तुमने ये लिखा ये बात ही गलत है एक स्टेटमेंट पर, और मेरी जो बात है वही सही है, कैसे कौन इस बात को निर्धारित करेगा? हमारे देश में वो भी निर्धारित होता है. I have said this, hence this has to be right. So be very careful. That takes away the whole idea of creativity. I'm saying this. My son was in 5th standard or 4th standard. I came back home one day and I saw him sad. I said, what happened? He said, I lost 1 mark in my maths test. I said, you will lose much more in life. Why get worried about 1 mark in the maths test? He said, no, but why did I lose? So he had drawn a line like this. And the teacher had asked to name the line, I think 4th or standard sometimes. So he was asked to label the line. It was a printed sheet and all. And he had written BA. The teacher had cut it off and said it should be AB. Now, all right, that Saturday, fortunately or unfortunately, I had an off and they had a PTM. So I went over. I talked to that person, and honestly, I'm telling you, I have no reason to lie, even though my wife still accuses me that I was doing it deliberately. But I'm honestly telling you that what I asked was very innocuous, and I had a genuine question in my mind. I asked the maths teacher that, is this a line or a vector? And, I suddenly saw my wife rolling her eyes and later on telling me that you go and rag teachers, that is not done. But I was not ragging her. I thought maybe she has taught them vectors or something. And therefore, there is a difference between AB and BA, And then she said, no, sir, it's a line. I said, ma'am, if it's a line, then how do I explain how AB is different from BA? If it's a vector, I can explain AB is different from BA. But then my wife said, you leave. And I left. That's completely okay. But my point is that अगर इस extent तक रटवाएंगे अपने बच्चों को, तो आगे चलकर वो कैसे creative होंगे? So I was trying to explain that we lost that modernity, because till then everybody used to learn by rote. The Europeans would mainly learn by rote the Bible, and we would learn by rote our theological texts and so on, But that learning by rote started changing by the middle of 16th century. And unfortunately, India never had it for next 200, 300 years. Then Macaulay comes, and Macaulay introduces in the name of modern education, an education where he wanted us to be clerks. So here we are, training ourselves to be clerical. अब याद करके देखिए, हमारे स्कूल में जब हम होते थे, आप भी जब होते होंगे 10th में, 11th में, 12th में, तो हमें टीचर्स इंस्ट्रक्शन देते थे, यही लिखना नहीं तो बोर्ड में नंबर नहीं आएगा. मतलब यही लिखूं मैं, कुछ और क्यों ना लिखूं, जो सही हो, लैंग्वेज अलग हो. So this is where the problem comes in. That when you have to be careful that unless we don't create that, and India is still stuck up in that thing, so we'll still take time. But unless we don't change that, innovation capital, India will find it difficult to become that. Innovation capital होने के लिए जरूरी है कि आप अपने बच्चों को सोचना सिखाएं, सोचना enjoy करना सिखाएं. सोचने से डरे नहीं, एक्सपेरिमेंट से डरे नहीं, हम कन्फर्मिस्ट बना देते हैं, वो गड़बड़ है. इन अ नटशेल आई एम टेलिंग यू दैट यू नो feudalistic societies make their children conformist. I did it, so hence you should do that. Why? I did something 30 years ago. Why should my 30-year younger son do the same thing? That fellow can do something else. And if he fails, so be it. He will succeed the next time. When did we succeed the first time? It didn't go like that. But that is how society has to learn to do that. You know, if the society learns it, then you are better off. Feudalistic societies don't learn it, because in feudalistic society, your power and your position is by birth. It is not by effort. Once you create that position by effort, that false ego dies out. And that is the best thing we should try doing. Industrialized societies do that. Industrialized societies, they work on their own self. What am I? You know, मेरे ग्रैंडफादर मान लो कोई हो सकते थे, पर उसमें मेरा तो कोई कंट्रीब्यूशन नहीं है ना. तो मैं क्लास में बोलूं अरे मेरे जो ग्रैंडफादर थे वो फलाना फलाना थे, होंगे, तो उसमें तुम क्या करोगे और मैं क्या कर सकता हूं? वो बन गए जो उनको बनना था. इसमें मैं अच्छा फील कर सकता हूं उनके बारे में सोचकर, ओ ग्रेट, आई वाज बोर्न टू समवन नाइस. Point is, but that cannot be a bragging point. You know, that can be a feel-good point. Okay, I feel good about something, but that can't be a bragging point. I can't say that you are less than me because my grandfather was better than your grandfather. Makes no sense. You know, that is my limited point. That's what I'm trying to teach you. So India, the question was very good, so I just tried answering it in detail, that India had feudalism even before the British came, but we were leading the Europeans before the British came. But the major reason was that we were a country which was thriving, fortunately, on a very good geography we had inherited. So we could do well. Don't forget, entire India was not thriving. You know, so when you go to India's less fertile regions, they were not doing that great. You understand that? So that in that sense you have to kind of bring an equilibrium in the mind. Okay, now so I can believe that the conclusion part is understood to you, that it's always about bringing people out of agriculture. Now I take you further. I will talk to you about, you give a heading, role of public sector in India's economic development, in pre-liberalization period. Deepak, I think it is already uploaded now. Don't worry. If I dictate once again, it will be a waste of our 2-3 minutes. I'm just trying to avoid that. Nothing else. Mainly on account of shopkeeping and all. I hope you could write that up, Krishnanand. All right. Now see, when we talk of role of public sector, there are 2-3 things to keep in mind. I'm just telling you that and I'll make you write it. First thing about role of public sector was that it created diversification of industries. We had diversified industries with public sector playing a big role in that. Second role was high development of infrastructure. Infrastructure development took place in public sector, again because of government spending a lot and developing it, especially in regions which were underdeveloped. Another big role that public sector was doing was, it was creating a link to the small scale industries and giving them business with which they could also grow gradually but assuredly, especially the ancillary units, the component units. All right. So, and another big role that public sector was playing was with respect to capital formation. When we became independent, the total investment ratio, public is to private, was approximately 35% public sector and 65% private sector. By the fourth 5-year plan, where it peaked, public sector investment was around 64% and private sector was 36% in total industries. Again, it started falling from the 5th 5-year plan, but even in the 7th 5-year plan, public sector investment in India was 53%. So that meant capital formation in India was heavily backed by public sector investment done. So if they ask us what is the role of public sector in India, these are the points on which we will build across as to what was the role of public sector in India. So I'm making you write it one by one. We will initiate it across. So you take it down, you write, public sector was given the role of, this is an introduction kind of. Public sector was given the role of commanding heights in second 5-year plan, full stop. Industrial Policy Resolution, Industrial Policy Resolution 1956 categorized industries into 3 groups. Full stop. Category A consisted of 17 industries. This you have already written, I hope you would recall. Consisted of 17 industries which were exclusively reserved for public sector Category B was reserved, Category B consisted of another 28 industries. Category B consisted of another 28 industries where all future investment was to be done by public sector Mind you, when we say all future investment, the difference was in category A, if there existed a private sector, it was nationalized. In category B, there was no nationalization. Private sector was allowed to continue, but all future investments to be done by public sector. And category C which included all other industries, had only private sector, but public sector was allowed to invest. If required. Then you please change the paragraph and write, major roles played by public sector can be listed as, and mind you, this is in context of pre-liberalization. What we are saying is in context of pre-liberalization. You write first, it promoted industrial diversification. It promoted industrial diversification. That is, India, which was producing only 12 types of industrial goods in 1947, was producing more than 8,000 manufacturing commodities, by 1991. Second point you write, or in the first point you add one more thing. It also initiated development of modern industries like chemical, electronic, electrical appliances, etc. in India. Then you write second, public sector extensively contributed to infrastructure development, mainly in the field of energy. Energy is power generation mainly. So energy and transportation. At the time of independence, in the same point, at the time of independence, India's total power generation capacity was 2300 megawatt, which increased to more than 1 lakh megawatt, by 1991. Also remember, I'm not making you write it, but keep it in mind. National highways, state highways were almost missing in India. Britishers had not constructed roads in India. So we almost constructed highways from the scratch. Even though we didn't do great, but still by 1997, the total national highway construction in India had reached 33,000 kilometers. Of course, we have done much better after that in the last 25 years. But 33,000 kilometers starting from the scratch was still a decent achievement, but nothing great, but still a decent achievement. So road transportation, railway sector modernization, and electrification. These were sectors where India was doing good. Communication, we were doing badly. Housing, we were doing badly. Urban development, we were doing badly. Alright, ये दो तीन sectors, इनको भी infrastructure में ही count करते हैं. So communication, housing, and urban development, we're performing poorly in that. But roads, railway, and electricity, we did pretty decent in that. Alright. Then you write next, third. It promoted capital formation in India. Capital formation in India, comma, where public sector's contribution to industrial development, industrial investment, sorry. Public sector's contribution to industrial investment increased from less than 40%, increased from less than 40% in 1947 to almost 66%, by 1974, where it peaked and remained, where it peaked, P-E-A-K-E-D, where it peaked and remained above 50% even during 7th five-year plan. 7th five-year plan was 85 to 90. So even during 7th five-year plan, the investment also includes technological inputs, and training of human resource. Technological inputs and training of human resource. All right. Then you write next point. You wrote 3, right? Yeah, you write another point. Contribution to employment generation. Contribution to employment generation. And you write public sector employment continuously increased from less than 1% of workforce in 1951, less than 1% of workforce in 1951 to more than 4% of workforce by 1991. Full stop. Apart from higher employment, apart from higher employment, comma, it also focused on higher social security, comma, better wages and better working conditions for poor. Better working conditions for poor. By poor here, we mean the lower end workers. Alright, that is what we call the poors here. And then you write one more, fifth. It promoted, no, I know, मेरा वक्त पूरा हो चुका है लेकिन मैं चाहता हूं कि आप बस ये जो आखिरी पॉइंट है वो लिख लें ताकि हम खत्म कर सकें इस बात को. You write, it contributed to development of relatively underdeveloped regions, For example, the 4 steel mills of India in foreign collaboration, the 4 steel mills, STEEL wala steel mills of India in foreign collaboration were established at relatively underdeveloped regions of Bokaro, Rourkela, Durgapur and Bhilai. So remember, the idea was that these regions will develop and create a demonstration effect and create infrastructure for other regions also to grow. All right. In the same thing, I'm sorry, जो लोग किताबें बंद कर चुके हैं उनसे क्षमा प्रार्थी हूँ, लेकिन एक लाइन और लिखना है आपको. You write in that, it also focused, same point, it also focused on development of basic infrastructure, like urban development, wherever it was established. Now, this is a talk that we do on all the benefits or the role of public sector. But I will tell you about some of the problems that we faced in public sector in this time period, and then conclude on that. On private sector, I will give you 150 words, 200 words for an in-case question. That in case they ask you on private sector, because private sector did not have a major role to play in this. And then we can begin with micro. All right, so tomorrow I see you and we'll begin with these then. Thank you. And online people, I'll have to leave early today. I have something very important lined up. So if you have doubts, please send it to me on Telegram. I'll be willing to address them. Thank you. If you provide data, you get better marks, Srishti. So it's advisable if you can provide data.